Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Today, we're going to continue talking about Black Beauty. That's our featured novel for this month. It's our literature unit, and last time we began to summarize the plot of Black Beauty. It sounded like it was going pretty well for Black Beauty, didn't it?
Yeah, Black Beauty had a nice childhood as a colt and then moved on to his first real job as a horse. It's kind of funny because when we talk about beauty, it feels like we're talking about a person, right? But Black Beauty had a good boss, a good master, and the people who worked in the stables, or the stable, I guess there was one, maybe two if you have a lot of money. The stable boy, Joe Green, treated him very well. Joe loved the horses and wanted to make sure they were treated well, they were fed well. They would, brush them down and make sure they were all set to go to sleep at night. But he did have a job. He worked pulling a private carriage with Lady Gordon, who loved beauty.
So things were going pretty well for Black Beauty, but this period of happiness, however, proves temporary. That's no surprise. Of course, this book is probably going to have its dark side, and maybe things will get better later on. Let's find out what happened next. Due to Lady Gordon's illness, because she was sick, the family must sell their horses and move abroad. So, of course, back then, as now, if you get sick, you're probably going to spend a lot of money. So she got sick, and their money ran low, so they had to sell their horses. They probably had to sell their estate or whatever and move to another country that...
yeah, she needed a drier climate, I think.
Okay, could be she had allergies or something, so maybe they had to move to Italy or Spain or whatever. Either way, they had to sell the horses, and so now Black Beauty has a new master. So now let's find out what happens next. Let's listen to the entire contents of today's lesson, and we'll be right back to talk about it. Black Beauty, a compassionate voice for animals. This period of happiness, however, proves temporary. Due to Lady Gordon's illness, the family must sell their horses and move abroad. Beauty's new owner values fashion over horse welfare. There, Beauty suffers from severe bits in his mouth and tight bearing reins that compel horses into an unnaturally vertical position just for style. One evening, his regular coachman is replaced by a drunk substitute who mishandles him and causes a serious accident. The crash injures Beauty and leaves him with a permanent scar and a limp, thereby diminishing his value. As a result, he begins a difficult journey and is passed from one owner to another. Later, Beauty becomes a cab horse in London. He pulls carriages through crowded streets and witnesses the cruel treatment of working horses. The heavy loads, prolonged hours, and check reins cause significant suffering. Beauty is not spared from this cruelty, and the harsh work gradually ruins his health. His condition worsens when he is sold to a ruthless rental stable owner who charges steep fees. To make a profit, drivers overwork the horses and whip them to keep going despite exhaustion. Eventually, overwhelmed by fatigue, Beauty collapses and is sold again. Just when all hope seems lost, a kind farmer named Thorogood notices Beauty's gentle nature at an auction and rescues him. After helping him recover, Thorogood finds him a permanent home with owners who promise never to sell him. Even better, his new home brings a joyful reunion with Joe Green, his former stable boy from Birtwick Park. Now surrounded by kind keepers, Beauty enjoys fresh grass, clean water, and gentle care. He is finally home and loved just as he once was.
Welcome back, guys. It's time to dive in and find out what happens next in Black Beauty's life. When we left you, we were quite happy for Black Beauty, you could say, because she had a good boss, the Gordons, Lady Gordon and Squire Gordon, and lived in a nice place called Birtwick Park, and just was generally experiencing life as a working horse, but being treated like royalty in some ways. The people that worked in the stable loved the horses, so they were treated well. And her work was just pulling a private carriage, which wouldn't be too bad, really, if you have a really good driver who doesn't overuse the reins we're going to talk about some of those things a little later. You know, what the reins are, what's a bit, and what it means by, making them gallop or walk vertically rather than horizontally. All of these things will affect the horse's well-being.
Okay, so again, as we said, this period of happiness does not last long. It's temporary, and Lady Gordon gets sick. Because of her illness, they have to sell their horses and move abroad. As you said earlier, maybe she had allergies or something like that, so they had to move someplace where she wouldn't be coughing and sneezing all the time, maybe to Italy or France or wherever. And Beauty's new owner values fashion over horse welfare. So Black Beauty here, has a new owner, and this particular owner has different values, different things that they find interesting or find more valuable. They value fashion, okay, what you look like on the surface. I guess they like face, and they're not too worried about the horse's welfare. Welfare just means well-being, how healthy the horse is, how happy it is. They don't really care. They just want to look good with the horses.
Now there, Beauty suffers from severe bits in his mouth. A bit is a metal bar in a horse's mouth that the reins are connected to. It helps control the horse. So if you pull to the right, that rein, which is kind of a leather strap, usually, if you pull to the right, the horse knows it needs to go to the right. If you pull to the left, of course, the horse would go to the left. You can use those reins and bits nicely or cruelly. And here it says those bits were very severe. They were harsh in his mouth. And then there were some very tight bearing reins. A bearing rein I had to look up. I didn't know what that was. But they're straps that are used to hold a horse's head up. If you look at a horse as he's walking, his head is focused towards the ground. So he's horizontal rather than vertical. But they thought the horse looked so much more beautiful if their head was straight up, looking up. But of course you would miss things on the ground because the horse's eyes would miss things. And also it was uncomfortable because it was an unnatural position for the horse. But the owners didn't care. They wanted what looked really beautiful. So vertical, what does vertical mean? It just means straight up and down. Horizontal is going back and forth, left to right. So that's what was making life difficult, were those severe bits, those harsh bits in his mouth, and then having to have his head pulled up vertically as he did his job.
It looks good, of course, and people are impressed if you have horses like that. Of course, they care about face there. And one evening, his regular coachman is replaced by a drunk substitute who mishandles him and causes a serious accident. So, of course, you've got a coachman. That's a person who is in charge of controlling the horse if they pull a coach or if they pull a carriage.
He's the driver that sits on top of the carriage.
Exactly. And, of course, the regular one lost his job or moved away, and he's replaced by a drunk substitute. This substitute likes to drink alcohol, so is always drunk. And as a result, he mishandles Black Beauty and causes a serious accident. So if you mishandle something, you don't handle something like you should, you don't take care of something in a respectful or a responsible way, he's irresponsible and does not ride the horse properly, and that brings about an accident. And, of course, he gets injured as a result.
If you've ever watched horses in films or movies or TV shows, if they get into a situation where they're scared or someone shocks them or surprises them or there's a loud noise, they become unsettled and sometimes they start galloping to try to get away from danger. And it sounds like this coachman didn't know what he was doing. Maybe the horse was scared at some point. Instead of trying to calm the horse, he would probably pull the reins tighter, and then the horse just kind of goes out of control. And a lot of people back then in those days were actually killed by horses in the streets because they maybe a horse started galloping and ran wild, and somebody was in the street and couldn't get out of the way. The horse would trample them, which means to stamp over or stomp over someone's body. And horses are so heavy that if you're hit by a horse or they step on you, it can really do a lot of damage. So the crash injures Beauty and leaves him with a permanent scar and a limp. So if you have a permanent scar, we talked about what scars were, things that remain as evidence of some injury you suffered before. It could be on your skin or inside your heart or your brain. Those are all scars. He was left with a limp. If you have a limp, it means you aren't able to walk evenly because of an injury. You might kind of lean to one side to protect maybe an injured leg. That will be a limp. Or you can't walk as fast. If you're injured, this is one of our words here. To injure just means to hurt someone or something. Or we use it in the passive tense, to be injured. I was injured. I became injured after this happened. So poor Beauty, because of a really bad coachman, is left with a scar and a limp.
Right, so that's a permanent scar. It's always there. Sometimes people get hurt when they're kids and they have a permanent scar. I've met some people who got burns because of incense when they went to the temple with grandma or whatever, and they got accidentally burned by some incense. So they have a permanent scar there. And he's got a limp there. I've got a bad knee myself, and sometimes my knee hurts and I need to walk with a limp. You just kind of wobble back and forth. And, of course, these things diminished his value because he had this scar, because he walked with this limp. He wasn't as valuable anymore, and as a result, he begins a difficult journey and is passed from one owner to another. So the new owner probably saw that Black Beauty no longer had any value. Oh, you walk with a limp. You've got that scar. That's a loss of face for me. I need to have a proud, handsome-looking horse, and you're not it anymore. So here, the horse is passed from one owner to another. Nobody really wants Black Beauty because he's got these problems.
Oh, it's so sad. And again, we know that some people only look on the exterior and not the interior. We do that with people too, right? We judge someone based on what they look like rather than their character and how they treat other people. Well, he was being judged because suddenly he had a really kind of ugly scar and he was limping. People who wanted a good carriage horse wouldn't necessarily choose a horse with a limp. So this diminished his value, reduced his value, and this is when he starts or begins his difficult journey, and he's passed from one owner to another. So he doesn't stay long with one owner. He's with them for a short time, and then they sell him to someone else, and then he's sold again. And it's really hard. Those of you out there who have had to move from place to place to place, no, it's hard because you don't feel like you have a real home.
Exactly. So he's going to have a hard life here for a while. And here in the next paragraph it says, later Beauty becomes a cab horse in London. Okay, so he's kind of useless as a show horse for rich people. He's got that scar and he walks with a limp. So he can have another purpose here. He goes to London to become a cab horse. They don't really care what you look like if you're doing that job. You're just pulling carriages through the city because people need to get from one point to another. So he's basically a taxi driver here, or he is the taxi himself. He's pulling that carriage so that passengers can ride through the streets of London. And yes, in this particular case, though, he pulls those carriages through crowded streets and witnesses the cruel treatment of working horses. Okay, so he's got to pull the carriages through those crowded streets. Of course, back in those days, London streets were pretty chaotic with horses and people and all sorts of things going on in the streets. They're probably not paved either. They were mud, and so there was dirt everywhere and poop or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was quite crowded. And, of course, if you're a cab driver, hey, you need that horse to go fast so your customers can get to where they're going as quickly as possible. So they're very cruel to the horses. They're probably whipping them and beating them and stabbing them in the sides with stirrups or whatever. I guess that's what a cowboy would do.
Yeah. They had to carry heavy loads, and even though horses are very, very strong animals, remember, Beauty at this point has an injured leg, so it would have been more difficult to carry heavy loads. They had prolonged hours. Prolonged just means lasting longer than usual. So maybe typically a horse would be working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 12 hours. If it was prolonged, he would go past that and have to work even longer hours. It's hard when you're at work and your boss needs you to stay and work overtime. You could say, because of the prolonged hours at my current job, I decided to look around for a new gig, a new business, a new place to work. It's hard to keep working overtime all the time. It just exhausts you. Now, he also had problems with check reins, and that was causing significant suffering. So these are just some of the ways that they would control the horse. A check rein, I had to look this up. I don't know what it's like to actually control a horse, but these are straps that keep a horse's head up. I think it's very similar to those bearing reins that we talked about. So that was really difficult to constantly have your head jerked up when it wanted to be horizontal. That was hard for him. Beauty is not spared from this cruelty. So suddenly, those stories of cruelty that he'd learned through his friend Ginger, the horse that was treated badly, these stories of cruelty are happening to Beauty himself, which is hard. We're going to talk more about this, guys, but first, we're going to turn some time over to our Chinese teacher, and then we'll be back.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们昨天带大家看了《黑神驹》这个小说。那昨天我们提到啊，这个黑神驹啊，这一匹小黑马呢，它因为长大，然后被卖到这个 Berwick Park， 当然也过得不错啊，然后也有交到好朋友。但是啊，今天故事有些转折哦。这一段幸福的时光并不是很长久，因为 Lady Gordon 生病的关系，所以他们只好把马匹都卖掉，移居国外去了。那黑神驹呢，它就被卖带给新的主人啊。可是它的新的主人呢，比较重视时尚 fashion， 而不是马匹的福利 welfare。诶，你会觉得奇怪哦，什么马匹的时尚是什么意思啊？因为我们在明天其实会剖析一下为什么这一本小说这个儿童读物会诞生。其实有一个很重要的读者啊，有一群很重要的读者，就是跟马工作的人啦。好，也就是当时呢，其实在这个维多利亚时期啊，有一些陋习，其实对马匹不是很友善的。所以如果马要看起来很漂亮呢，会做一些什么事呢？比如说这个马弦啊、缰绳啊，其实都会让他们的身体非常的不舒服。我们在第一段的第4句就有看到，第4句 severe bits in his mouth and tight berry reins。 这个 tight berry reins 这3个字先划线起来，它后面带着一个限定用法的关系子句。好，带得到句尾可以左右括号起来。那这样子的一个紧绷的缰绳如何呢？这个缰绳会迫使 compel someone to do something， 在括号里面会迫使马匹保持一种很不自然的垂直的姿势，是很不舒服的。好，那有一天呢，发生了一件事情，因为马夫就是有一个代班的马夫来这个驾驶这个神驹。这个代班的马夫这个 substitute 他不小心操作不当，就发生了严重的事故。而这一次的事故呢，就让神驹受伤，而且留下永久的疤痕啊、跛脚啊，让他的价值就整个的变得非常低。好，我们看一下第一段的第6句 This crash 这样子的一个意外，逗点之后我们直接拉到接近句尾的地方哦。逗点之后 thereby 是副词，就是因此，可是后面的 diminishing 这个 ing 可以特别圈一下，因为它是分词构句。好，分词构句就是逗点之后的 and 省略掉，所以后面的我们看到的变成价值比较低、降低价值的这个 diminish 这个动词直接变成动词 ing， 连接词省略的分词构句。所以开始怎么办呢？它又要被卖掉。好，后来又卖到哪里去呢？卖到伦敦那边做一匹出租马的这个车马。好，我们来到第2段的地方，它变成一个 cab horse。好，第2段的第1句 cab horse。那当然如果是出租马的车马，那可想见的就是一定是尽量的操这些马跑久一点、跑快一点再多一点客人没有错。工作的马匹受到很多残酷的对待，所以第3句这个地方我们看到的 heavy loads 负荷很沉重prolonged hours 长时间的工时，甚至是控制的缰绳都造成巨大的痛苦，非常的不舒服。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're on day 2 of Black Beauty, a novel about a horse that is written about as if this horse is human, a real person. So we learn from Beauty about his life, his friends, his mother, what his mother taught him growing up, and also about some of the cruel experiences Ginger, his friend that he knew growing up, had experienced. And now we're in a different stage of his life that isn't so happy. He is sold into working for a different family after he got to work for the Gordons that seemed to be really quite nice to him. They loved him. But they had to move, and so Beauty's new owner is really concerned over how his horses look. How his horses look is so much more important to him than the horse's welfare, how they feel and how they're being treated. So Beauty suffers from things that make the horse look more beautiful, like bits that are placed in his mouth. Most horses have bits, but his was very harsh and hurt his mouth. And then he also had something that were called bearing reins. They would pull his head back up vertically, and that was uncomfortable. And one evening, his regular coachman is replaced by someone who is drunk. He doesn't care about the horse. He mishandles him. He probably pulls on the reins wrong. I think something must have happened, and something scared Beauty, and he got out of control and started running, and this caused a serious accident. There was a crash, and it injures Beauty, and it leaves him with a permanent scar. Remember, Beauty is beautiful. This horse was gorgeous, and it also left Beauty with a limp. So he couldn't walk as smoothly and beautifully after that. It diminished his value, and from then on, he is sold from one owner to another.
And then he becomes a cab horse in London. It's very hard work because, they're being driven to carry transportation or to provide transportation, rather, to passengers in London. So he's treated cruelly, and he has prolonged hours. He works overtime a lot, and he's got those check reins where they pull up his head, and that causes lots of suffering. And he's not spared from this cruelty. He has to endure this cruelty. There's nobody who's going to be kind to him. And we've got this harsh work, which gradually ruins his health. If something's harsh, it's terrible, it's unpleasant, it's difficult. So he's got this difficult work that he has to do. And as a result, it starts to affect his health. He becomes more and more sick, more and more weak, or weaker and weaker. His condition worsens when he is sold to a ruthless rental stable owner who charges steep fees. So, if you thought things are bad already, it gets even worse. If something gets even worse than it was before, then you could say it worsens, it gets worse, it's not as good as it used to be. It's harsher, it's more cruel. And he's sold to a ruthless rental stable owner who charges a lot of money. If you're ruthless, you don't really have any scruples or any morals or any values. You show no pity or compassion for others. You're just really mean and cruel, and you don't care.
I wanted to mention this word worsen that you were talking about, Tom. Sometimes we'll take adjectives and we turn them into verbs by adding en, like dark, darken to make something darker, wide, widen to make something wider, bright to brighten to make something brighter. Here we're doing the same thing, worse and worsen, making it even worse than it was before. And ruthless, they are very cruel people. They have no sense of kindness towards others at all. And he charges very steep fees, it says. Steep, when you use it to talk about money, just means excessive, a lot higher than it should be, exorbitant. We use that word too. To make a profit, the drivers overwork the horses. And again, they use that whip to whip them, which hurts the horse, to keep going despite the horse's exhaustion. If you work so many hours that you have no energy left, that's when we use that word. You're worked to exhaustion, or I'm exhausted from working overtime, and you need a break. So eventually, overwhelmed by fatigue, Beauty collapses and is sold again. If you're overwhelmed by something, it just means you have too much of something to handle. You can't deal with it. You have just too much. Some days I'll wake up and I'm overwhelmed by the emails in my email box. So you can be overwhelmed by a lot of different things. Here, fatigue just means tiredness. So at this point, Beauty collapses.
Yep, he falls down and is no longer valuable as a cab driver, or a cab horse, I should say.
Yeah.
And here in the final paragraph it says, just when all hope seems lost, a kind farmer named Thorogood notices Beauty's gentle nature at an auction and rescues him. So this is a good turn of events for Black Beauty here. When all seems lost, when he's at the end of his tether, when it seems like he's about ready to die from exhaustion or whatever, he runs into a kind farmer, a nice, gentle, generous farmer. His name is Thorogood. That's his family name, by the way. And he notices Black Beauty's gentle nature. Hey, this is a really nice horse, and this is an auction where people offer prices for things and people try to outbid each other. I bid $5. No, I bid $6. I bid $7. Sold to the man in the red hat. And that's what an auction involves. And here the horse is sold at an auction, and Farmer Thorogood takes him home and starts to be nice to him.
This is great. You know, even today, I was just watching a video this last week of someone who goes and rescues horses that are going to be put to death because they're older, you know, or they have some sort of injury. And this person takes them home and she puts them in her pasture outside her house. She has a farm, and they get to live the rest of their lives in peace and quiet. They don't have to work anymore. They're not whipped. They don't have those severe bits and reins pulling on their heads all the time. So after helping Beauty recover, getting back to health, Thorogood finds him a permanent home with owners who promise never to sell him. So Thorogood might be someone who provides a temporary home for abused or mishandled horses and then looks for a permanent owner and a permanent home for the horses to live out the rest of their days. So even better, his new home brings a joyful reunion with Joe Green. Look at that. Joe Green works at the same place that Beauty is being sold to. That's his last home forever. Joe Green, of course, was the former stable boy, former means before, prior stable boy from Birtwick Park. Remember that? That was with the Gordons. So if you have a reunion, it means you've been away from people for a while. And if you have a reunion, you all get together and talk about what life has been like for all of you. Sometimes we have school reunions. I love how Taiwanese folks often get together with their elementary school classmates. We don't do that in America. We'll have high school reunions and college reunions. But I love that you guys keep in touch with your junior high school friends and your elementary school friends, and you have a formal reunion. You can have reunions with your family. I have a huge family, and so we have to plan in advance for reunions when we all get together and eat and laugh and play.
Yep, a family reunion or a class reunion or whatever. So he has this reunion with the former stable boy from Birtwick, and his name is Joe Green. Now surrounded by kind keepers, Beauty enjoys fresh grass, clean water, and gentle care. Indeed, this story does have a happy ending. He is finally home and loved just as he once was. So I guess this story starts out nice. It gets worse for the horse, and later he can enjoy his final days in peace and quiet. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
所以神居也是一样啊，都是一样 heavy loads, prolonged hours， 非常的这个糟糕，所以健康情况一定非常的不好嘛。总而言之呢，这整个 gradually 就把他的 health 健康整个 ruin 整个摧毁掉了。那后来既然没有健康啊，跑不快啊，不能载很多客人，又被转卖。我们来到第二段的第5句哦。当他被卖给一个收取高额的无情的马车的出租厂老板，情况更为恶化。第5句有一个限定用法关系子句，先行词有点长，在中间的地方 a ruthless rental stable owner。 好，那这个 owner 如何呢？互到句尾啊，修饰限定他有什么样的特质，他就是要收取高额的费用，所以情况更恶化啦。因为为了要获利嘛， 马夫们都是过度操劳马匹啊，跑快一点啊，一直鞭打啊，到最后神驹就因为太过于疲倦，整个倒下，又被卖掉。在第二段的第7句，我们这个地方特别抓出来，因为它是个分词构句。怎么说呢？第7句的第一个字虽然是一个副词 eventually finally 到最后，可逗点之后我们突然看到一个过去分词叫做 overwhelmed by fatigue。 好， overwhelm 这个字就是使人没有办法承受，使人没有办法负荷。使谁啊？就是这些 heavy loads 使得 overwhelm beauty， 使得神驹没有办法负荷。所以其实还原的话呢，它句子本来是 because beauty is overwhelmed by fatigue， 因为神驹不堪负荷，没办法再承受这一种疲劳的情况，逗点 beauty collapsed and it's sold again， 它就倒下又被转卖。所以既然都在谈 beauty 的状况嘛，那连接词 because 就直接删掉。because 这个连接词也是最常被省略的分词构句，在我们的对话当中，因为什么样所以怎么样，因为怎么样所以怎么样，这是我们很常用的逻辑，所以 because 是最容易被省略的。当连接词不见的时候， be 动词就要直接变 being 啊， being 本身没有任何意义， be 动词是功能嘛，所以在句子的简化 being 又会被删掉。 overwhelmed by fatigue 就是因为太过于疲倦了，所以它又再次被转卖。好，所有希望好像都幻灭了，糟糕啦，出现了一个好人啊。 Thoroughgood 有一个农夫啊，善良的农夫在拍卖会上注意到神驹，然后呢帮他找了一个永久的家，而且找到一个承诺永远不会再卖掉他的新主人。我们来到最后面第3段，请注意第2句这个地方，第2句最后面的地方有一个限定用法关系子句哦。这个先行词叫做 owners 主人，什么样的主人呢？限定他有这种特质 who 到这个句尾可以左右括号，也就是我刚刚说承诺不会再卖掉他的 owners 主人。所以现在呢，神驹啊就享受着青草啊，干净的水，又再一次的被爱，跟从前一样。我们明天还会对这个故事呢做更深入的剖析。我是安娜，我们明天见。
That's it for today. Thank you for joining us, and make sure you check out our extra content on YouTube and Facebook, and also join us next time when we complete this month's edition of our literature unit, Black Beauty. Please join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.